It's almost 10 years since the Twin Towers collapsed in New York. The Pentagon was ablaze and the wreckage of Flight 93 lay smouldering in a field. And now the most wanted man in the world is dead. But Osama bin Laden wasn't found in a remote cave and he wasn't killed by an airstrike or well-targeted bomb. Bin Laden was living in a large villa not far from the Pakistani capital, Islamabad, in a garrison town filled with military personnel. And he died in a firefight shot by covert US operatives. An Indonesian analyst warns of potentially grave consequences. We'll cross to Washington to get the perspective of David Kilcullen, the former Australian Army colonel who's one of the world's leading counter-terrorism experts. But we begin with the discrepancies emerging over the question of whether American Special Forces troops carried out the raid that killed the world's most wanted man without first informing the government of Pakistan that they'd tracked down Osama bin Laden. A US official has told Reuters Pakistani officials were informed of the details of the raid after it took place. Other accounts say members of Pakistan's intelligence service, the ISI, were on site during the operation. At stake is more than a loss of face. There's deep resentment in Pakistan over US military strikes against local terror targets. In the United States, from President Barack Obama down, the death of the al-Qaeda leader is being hailed as a stunning victory in the decade-long war on terror that began after the attacks on New York and Washington in September 2001. Peter Lloyd reports.
This is the site of Osama bin Laden's last stand. He was hiding out in the mountain town of Abbottabad. It's a highly militarised corridor of northeast Pakistan on the road to the disputed border with India and just 2 hours' drive from the capital Islamabad. It was an American-led operation based on intelligence dating back to last year.
Last August, after years of painstaking work by our intelligence community, I was briefed on a possible lead to bin Laden. It was far from certain, and it took many months to run this thread to ground. I met repeatedly with my national security team as we developed more information about the possibility that we had located bin Laden hiding within a compound deep inside Pakistan. And finally, last week, I determined that we had enough intelligence to take action and authorized an operation to get Osama bin Laden and bring him to justice. After a firefight, they killed Osama bin Laden and took custody of his body.
Along with bin Laden, 3 men were killed. One of them is said to be one of his sons. A woman who was used as a human shield by one of the men was also killed in the firefight. US media reports say bin Laden's body has been buried at sea, denying his supporters a martyr's shrine.
The death of bin Laden marks the most significant achievement to date in our nation's effort to defeat al-Qaeda.
Jubilant flag-waving celebrations erupted in Washington outside the White House. Ordinary Americans sensing an historic moment had arrived. And it was no ordinary moment in Times Square, New York, as Americans expressed a collective sense of victory tinged with relief.
It's amazing. It's a page turn for America today.
I feel ecstatic that we finally have captured and contained what the worst threat in the country and the world is, and that finally our country could be at rest and at peace with the situation that has happened in September 11th.
Bin Laden's death comes just months before the 10th anniversary of the attack on New York and Washington that killed 3,000 people. At Ground Zero, Americans were hailing an end to a dark chapter, just as their president was warning that the war against the ideas of Osama bin Laden is far from finished.
Yet his death does not mark the end of our effort. There's no doubt that al-Qaeda will continue to pursue attacks against us. We must, and we will, remain vigilant at home and abroad.
In Afghanistan, the country where America went to war on Osama bin Laden and his terror movement, there was this pointed observation from President Hamid Karzai.
The war against terrorism should not be followed in the villages of Afghanistan. The war against terrorism should be carried out in his safe haven and his training camp, not in Afghanistan, and today this has been proved right.
These are the first pictures from inside bin Laden's hideout. Pakistani officials, long accused of playing a double game, supporting the US-led war on terror while giving quiet support to the Taliban in Afghanistan, will be under pressure to explain how the world's most wanted man could have been right under their noses. The compound was built 6 years ago and had conspicuous security measures even by Pakistani standards. The leader of al-Qaeda may be dead, but the threat posed by the movement remains. Tonight, the US government issued a travel alert for Americans worldwide. The fear now, reprisal attacks. Peter Lloyd, Lateline.